guys, welcome back to another video. So for today's sketchbook session, I am planning to revisit gouache. I was looking at the inside cover of my sketchbook and I was thinking, why am I struggling so much with gouache? So I was trying to find when was the last time I used gouache, which happens to be that Kaisen piece that you just saw earlier. But today, I thought it'd be fun to work on another kind of small spread again, but we are going to be painting Albedo. So because the new teaser, I guess, or trailer for the next update for Genshin Impact came out and we're coming back to Mondstadt, it kind of kickstarted or reinvigorated me back into wanting to draw more Genshin characters. I took a little bit of a break of just consuming the content very slowly and not churning out too many fan art drawings of them, if that makes sense. But now that we're revisiting Mondstadt, I don't know, I just really love a lot of the characters from probably very early on beginning of Genshin, so seeing them again just makes me very happy. But with that being said, I wanted to at least revisit gouache. So even though I have the energy and the motivation to really make some sort of fan art of Albedo, I was hopefully hoping that I would have the same amount of enjoyment and enthusiasm to work with a medium that I tend to struggle with. So we are going to be using gouache today, and as you guys know, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with gouache. I do like a lot of the ones that I've done in the past, and I just like the look of it, the painterliness, the matte finish, the colors. It's just, there's a lot of things I like about gouache, but sometimes when I'm doing painting, I get into this weird state where I either give up too early or I just don't give myself enough time to work with it, and because of that, I get frustrated with the medium quite often. So let's talk a little bit about the process first before we jump into more talks about the gouache and stuff. So I already went ahead and did two sketches in fact, of Albedo, and I did them in the palette Color ENO because I knew I wanted to be able to utilize using water to help dissolve some of my sketch lines. Now, I don't want to lose my lines entirely, so I went ahead also on camera this time to do kind of a cleaner sketch with just a normal mechanical pencil. This won't dissolve in water, so I won't have to really worry about losing my lines once we start applying some paint or moisture. Now, kind of with our lines finished with the pencil, I'm going to go ahead and move on to a medium that I am much more comfortable with, which is watercolor. So when I mean comfortable with, I mean control-wise as well as color mixing. I am more confident in using watercolors versus using something like gouache. I always get comments or advice from other people, including you guys, saying that I should probably do my washes similar to watercolor, but use it with diluted gouache. And even though I would agree with that, it's just me having to think a little bit more about the transparent layers of using gouache, and the color mixing is just a little bit iffy for myself. I'm just more faster and more proficient in mixing in colors and all that stuff with using watercolors. So to speed up the process, I'm just gonna stick with watercolors before I start painting with gouache. Now, there's two main reasons I do this typically, especially when I'm working in my sketchbook, which is actually a notebook with very thin, very smooth paper, is that I like to plan out colors so that I know where, let's say, lighting is, or I want to have a specific color palette or something, then I can kind of plan that out with watercolors and not be totally lost when we go and jump into with kind of the opaqueness of gouache. But then the other reason I like doing this is actually because I get to kind of prime the paper a little bit, because the paper is so smooth that sometimes the gouache doesn't really want to adhere, and you'll see it a little bit here and there. But the paper being wet from the watercolor and just the water in general, it just provides a little bit of grit. So moving on to my gouache set, I did quickly take a look to see if there's any mold. Like I said, it's been a while since I've even used this gouache set. I have my sketchbook in front of me, so I'm actually going to quickly check if I dated this to see when was the last time I even used gouache. So the page before it was in February, and the page after was also in February. So I probably did it like mid-February, early February is when I was last using gouache to some degree. So it's been a couple of months. I think today's session went pretty well. So most of my attention is going to be focused on the bigger albedo because that's the one that I initially planned to draw. I did not really have any other ideas I wanted to do for like the entirety of the spread. I was thinking maybe I would do some just like pencil sketches or like colored pencils or something else on the side, but I ended up painting the one on the right hand as well. So you'll kind of see the difference between like my I was gonna say attention to detail, but it's more like how much motivation I have to finish the painting between the two. There's one that has like a significant more amount of energy versus the other one where you can kind of see at the tail end that's kind of like losing steam. So I always try to think about why exactly I don't like working with gouache, and I know it's because the consistency is not exactly what I want it to be, and part of it's because of like how I take care of my particular gouache set. So I'm lucky that none of my gouache like little paint buckets or whatever you want to call them, none of them have mold, which is great. I know a lot of people who struggle with having their HIMI gouache sets or any sets that are very similar to kind of like this jelly cup kind of consistency that's like in an airtight-ish container. And oftentimes like people find that they get mold. So I don't know if it's because my paints dry out quite a bit over time because I don't overload them too much with water, and I try my best like every so often, if I can remember, I will take the time to actually like water them down, break them up, and remix them again so that they kind of feel a little bit fresh. But because of that, I do go bouts of like time where I don't actually use the gouache that frequently, and they do dry out, so they become more like paint pans of watercolor where the water didn't really like revive them too much. It kind of just like swipes on the surface, so I get much more of a thinner, streakier consistency versus like more of a creamier consistency that you can kind of see while I'm kind of like trying my best to build up layers on the albedo piece. I did try my best to go a little bit more of like a thinner, more, I don't know, a layered look at the very beginning until we start getting a little bit more confident with the shapes or with the colors that I want to do. So luckily for Albedo, the color of his skin tone and his hair and just like the gloves and stuff, everything was pretty easy for me to mix. So there was not really anything I was like super struggling with. I know oftentimes when I do painting with gouache or anything like that, hair tends to be my favorite part. I definitely think with the consistency that I had, you can see the streakiness that is kind of appearing when I'm placing down this like cooler gray color for his hair shadows. It's like patchy and streaky, so I will have to go back eventually and start to thicken up my paint, hopefully mix it in a little bit more so that we can get an opaque coverage, because that's like one of the appeals I really like just about gouache in general, is being able to have like full coverage of these really bold colors. Or if you work like more painterly, you can kind of play around with the difference between transparent, more I guess like thinner layers, and then the opaque layers that are a little bit more punchier or like have sharper edges or something like that. So kind of for like the first section, I went through more of like a time-lapse mode of me filling in majority of the colors that I wanted to work with. After that, I went ahead and switched brushes to kind of like downsize so that we can work on some other details, and hopefully we'll just keep downsizing until we are ready to do some line art, which in this case, when I work with watercolor or with gouache, I do end up typically using the same medium for the line work. Other ones like alcohol markers, pencil crayons, graphite, sometimes when I do line art, I use like an inking pen, I use water-based markers, I can use ballpoint pen. It's like a different medium. So when I work with paints, I do worry about having less control, because having more control with my lines, I find a lot easier if I use like something of like a writing utensil rather than something like a paintbrush where the tip of the brush hairs are very flexible and they bend a lot. So once we start getting into the line art, you're gonna see that I kind of switch between two brushes so that I can utilize getting thinner lines and hopefully getting a bit more of a cleaner look for Albedo. So I did include a few kind of like real-time clips here and there once we started working on a few more of the details. And hopefully at this point, I'm working with a slightly more opaque consistency. So I did try my best for the most part, work from general to specific. So when I was blocking in with like the larger brush, I did try my best to kind of like do transparent-ish layers. And this is where it comes in handy that I have some sort of like color on the page already. I forget to mention this sometimes, but another reason like why I like to use watercolor first, besides having more of like confidence with like the color palette and just placing colors, and then having some sort of tooth or grit for the gouache to kind of adhere to so it's not slipping and sliding around. The third reason I would say would be actually trying to knock out as much of the weight of the paper as I can, because a lot of the time that kind of like patchy or streaky look, it comes from like a lot of the weight of the paper kind of popping through, or like any previous layers. So in this case, you can see in like Albedo's gloves where it's kind of like the reddish brown part, I didn't really put like a strong amount of color down when I did the gloves. So because of that, you can kind of see a lot of the red being very translucent and sheer. It kind of pops through a lot of the paper. So when I was doing like Albedo's hair, or when I was doing his skin tone, because one, they're on the lighter side, so a lot of the times you won't be able to see too much of the weight of the paper anyways, but I did have a little bit more of like an accurate color representation of my watercolor version before I went to the gouache. So I think I was like trying to look for a session that I've done on my YouTube channel of the one that I did of Eki, or like the reverse version of Ike Eveland. And I might try to look for it a little bit later, but I was trying to remember whether or not I ended up doing a much more saturated or a lot more planning when it came to doing the roughs or planning out with the watercoloring stage, because that one had a little bit more like dramatic shadow in a way, and kind of a shift from blue to red. So I kind of want to revisit that just to check, because when I was doing Albedo, I did okay, I think, with his face and his hair, and then everywhere else I kind of ignored to some degree, because like I said, I do get a little bit impatient when it comes to working with gouache for whatever reason. I don't know if it is because of the general to specific, or just working with a medium that I feel like I have less control, and I get more frustrated easily when things don't go like super in my way when it comes to like the consistency or the color payoff, or like there's things that I could definitely improve on so that I would have a bit more of an easier time at least liking the pieces that I end up doing with gouache. But doing this one of Albedo did kind of make me want to do a little bit more gouache in the future more recently. So maybe I'll do a few more for like next week or like the week after or something like that. I want to kind of keep up the momentum if I can. And I forgot that like in the past, before I started doing the sticker paper to cover up bleed through, using it for alcohol markers, oftentimes for the backside of bleed through on like any sketchbook or notebook paper, like either acrylic markers or using gouache would have been my number one way of covering up stuff if I didn't want to resort to using scrap pieces of paper or sticky notes to cover up the bleed through. So I think because I've been so acclimated to using the sticker paper and using alcohol markers to kind of fill in spaces or use it to cover up previous alcohol marker bleed through, I haven't been gravitating towards using gouache. Even though like I know that's not my main reason why I don't use it, it's mostly because I find gouache to be a little bit more frustrating. But let's move on to the second Albedo. So for this one, hopefully it doesn't come out too shocking that I made him so orange very quickly. I wanted to give him more of like an overcasted look, so I went ahead and made the skin tone a little bit more on the darker side. I tried to darken up his hair so that we can even out some of our shadows, but the one thing that definitely stood out when I did this was the eyes, so I definitely needed to knock it back. So eventually you'll see that I'll use some thinner layers to almost like glaze over his eyes so that we can make it more into shadow, and then we can actually start to paint in more of the details at this point. I think also just in general when I work with traditional mediums or even like digital drawing, so it's probably just my overall preference when it comes to like art and drawing in general for like process-wise, I guess, or like me visually seeing my own art. I like things to be either crisp and clean or just like very smooth. So even looking at the one of Albedo that I'm working on right now, the patchiness definitely bothers me to some degree. Unless I plan to do like very clean, more detailed line art on top, then the coloring doesn't really matter. But overall, I don't like leaving my sketches like this too much. I try my best to either like salvage it or find some way to cheat through to getting more of a polished look. So this one does become a little bit more unfinished looking compared to the one that I did on the left-hand side, but I don't think it needed too much anyways, because if I overworked it, I probably would have hated it more too, because I was a little bit lost in terms of trying to capture like a specific lighting or like the color temperature in general. Also, I think it looks better on camera. The Albedo that's on the left-hand side, his eye color looks great on camera. I think it looks a little bit more dull in my sketchbook. And one thing I really love about just like Albedo art in general from like the official Genshin, like their art, is that his eye color is just so clear and bright. So I wish I could have imitated it, but I think that's also like part of my lack of mixing ability and just like proper care of gouache, because I do sometimes take shortcuts when it comes to like cleaning my brush. I try to cheat my way of going from light to dark oftentimes, and I don't clean my brush too much. So sometimes certain colors would have significant amount of either white or like previous colors mixed into it, so it doesn't appear as vibrant or as like it doesn't appear to be the color that I initially wanted. And it's probably due to the fact that I don't clean my brush as often as I should. And then I'm also a little bit lazy, because when painting just in general with any mediums, let's say watercolor, gouache, acrylics, oils is a different story, but oftentimes with water-based mediums, you need to have like two separate cups if you want to get like super bright colors that are like untainted, because you want to have like a dirty water cup to clean out your brush and then a clean water cup to remix like and re-wet your paints, so that you can kind of keep them not filled with debris or like previous colors or like anything like that from your brush. So even though I'm aware of these mistakes or like little habits that I do, I don't see myself correcting it too much. But if I get too frustrated, I will definitely try my best to just, you know, suck it up, continue to work on it to a certain degree and hope for the best, because I would like to get better at gouache. I say this almost every year since getting gouache. I just want to get more proficient in it, because a lot of the artists that I really like, a lot of them use like either gouache or some sort of like poster color, and they can do like really beautiful effects, which I wish I could do. And I would like to do more studies again where we could do foliage, because I kind of just really blobbed in the shapes for like the leaves above him, or what should be leaves. It kind of just looks like a fuzzy green wig of some sort on top of Albedo's head. So I tried my best to do a little bit of like the dappled lighting, but because I wasn't using like a specific reference for this one, oh, I'll make sure to link the reference for the first Albedo, because I think I was recommended it at the very beginning of like my Pinterest homepage. So I wanted to draw Albedo in that pose to some degree. So I'll make sure to link that in the description if I remember. But for this one, I did not really have like a proper reference. So I definitely struggled with doing like the dappled light. Oftentimes when I do it in like, I guess like Procreate or Clipstudio Paint, so like digitally, there's like a lot of workarounds where you can kind of get like somewhat correct shapes for like dappled light or like the light that comes through the leaves or whatever. So I don't know, there's some stuff I wish I would have been able to do with the gouache, but at this point I don't really mind how this one came out. It's not my favorite, but I don't think it's the worst compared to some other gouache paintings that I've done in the past. I would love to do another like red and blue one, so we could do D. Luke and Kaya, since they were also present in that trailer teaser. Oh, I also forgot. So for this particular Albedo piece, I don't know if you guys can kind of tell. Maybe you can tell with the zoom up version. In kind of like certain areas, it's a little bit more patchy, but this one, his face is definitely much more patchier, even though my camera won't pick it up. And I wish I did a little bit more of a darker wash when I did the watercolor base, just to kind of like potentially fix it up a little bit before I could have done the gouache on top. I don't know, just small things to think about if I want to work more in this particular notebook or sketchbook paper. Oh, also, I forgot. I accidentally ripped this out for whatever reason. I don't know why it fell out, but I'm still going to use it as the bookmark for my sketchbook. I might see if I have any sort of like adhesive that I can stick it back into the spine of the book so that it doesn't fall out again. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's rambly session of me using gouache, and I will talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!